At 6, the Health Secretary warns COVID cases could reach 100,000 a day this winter as he urges more people to get vaccinated. JAVID says around 5 million people over the age of 16 have still not had the jab and stresses the pandemic is far from over.
We've been in a race between the vaccine and the virus. And although we're ahead in that race, the gap is narrowing.
It comes as health leaders urge the return of some restrictions in England, like compulsory mask wearing in certain settings.
This is the lesson we must learn from the past, to prepare for what looks like an inevitable, challenging period, rather than to cross our fingers and stumble into a crisis.
But the government says it won't be bringing in tighter restrictions under its Plan B at this point, also tonight. A woman claims she was injected with a drug at a nightclub as the Home Secretary urges police to assess urgently a reported rise in drink and needle spiking. Buckingham Palace says the Queen has reluctantly cancelled a 2-day visit to Northern Ireland on medical advice to rest. And a mission to rescue dogs trapped by lava on the Spanish island La Palma.
And coming up on the BBC News channel, Ole's under pressure. Will a night of European football bring a reaction from Manchester United? They host Atalanta in the Champions League.
Good evening and welcome to the BBC News at 6. The Health Secretary has warned that there could be up to 100,000 COVID cases a day this winter as the number of new cases keeps rising. JAVID urged millions of people who are still unvaccinated to come forward, saying the UK is in a race between the virus and the vaccine, but the gap is narrowing. But Mr JAVID said tighter restrictions, such as the government's Plan B, such as the return of compulsory face coverings in England and a return to working from home, will not be introduced at this point, though he did advise wearing face masks in crowded settings. The number of cases across the UK has been rising sharply, and the 7-day average is standing at 45,799 cases per day, one of the highest weekly figures of new reported cases in the world, although deaths are well below the winter peak. Here's our health editor, Hugh Pym.
Queues of ambulances waiting to hand over patients at some hospitals reflect mounting pressure on the NHS because of a range of conditions and not just COVID. Now there are demands for a tightening of the rules, Plan B in England.
When you have the combination of winter pressures, COVID pressures and the backlog, put all of that together, you've got a perfect storm, and that's why we need to do everything we can to reduce the pressure, and that's why we need Plan B now.
Medical leaders have also warned of the serious strain on hospitals, ambulance services and GP practices and said some intervention may well be required.
When it comes to Plan B, sooner will certainly be better than later. And things at the NHS are precarious right now. This pandemic is still raging. I would urge everyone to take personal responsibility right now, irrespective of what national guidelines are.
The government says it'll introduce Plan B if there's unsustainable pressure on the NHS in England, with steps like making face coverings mandatory in some settings, asking people to work from home and introducing vaccine passports. In Northern Ireland, face coverings remain a legal requirement in crowded indoor spaces. It's the same for masks in Wales. Proof of vaccination at nightclubs is needed and people are encouraged to work from home. Scotland's strategy similarly includes vaccine passports and face masks in schools and some other settings. The Health Secretary warned cases could yet hit 100,000 a day, while stopping short of announcing new measures.
We're looking closely at the data, and we won't be implementing our Plan B of contingency measures at this point. But we'll be staying vigilant, preparing for all eventualities, while strengthening our vital defences that can help us fight back against this virus.
He also announced deals to secure 2 new treatments for COVID patients, which could be available soon if approved by regulators. Ministers say the strategy in England for now is to focus on the continued rollout of vaccines, booster jabs and first and second doses for those who haven't already had them. But the big unknown is whether that can happen fast enough to help slow any future spread of the virus. Here, Gareth is getting a third dose. He's eligible because he's undergoing treatment for cancer and his immune system has been compromised.
I feel great, actually. I feel a lot more confident going forward. I'm a great believer in the vaccination programme.
And in a bid to speed up the process, the system for booking booster jabs has been made simpler for those who are eligible 6 months after their second doses. Hugh Pym, BBC News.
Well, the number of new cases has been rising fast across the UK, with infections in the last week up 17% compared to the week before. The latest daily figures show there were 49,139 new infections recorded in the latest 24-hour period, which means there were 45,799 cases on average per day in the past week. The number of people in hospital with COVID is slowly rising. It's now 7,891. There were another 179 deaths recorded. That's of people who died within 28 days of a positive test. On average, there were 136 deaths per day in the past week. Well, let's see how the situation differs across the nations now. Emma Vardy is in Stormont, Sarah Smith is in Glasgow, but first to Mark Hutchings in Cardiff.
Well, very challenging are the words that the Welsh Government are using to describe the months that lie ahead. Actually, if you roll back, then Welsh case rates were the lowest of the UK nations in the first part of the year. More recently, they've been the highest. As for talk of a Plan B elsewhere, ministers here say, well, that's already part of their current Plan A, because face coverings remain compulsory in many settings, albeit with rather mixed public response. COVID passes are now required in places like nightclubs, and the message remains work from home if you can. I'm told it's not thought there are any increases in restrictions looming, but we'll know more at next week's government review.
Cases here in Northern Ireland rose as children went back to school, but have since declined, although they remained steadily higher than some of the lower numbers we'd previously begun to see during lockdowns. Now, ministers have warned people that the wearing of masks is going to continue being a legal requirement in Northern Ireland in busy indoor spaces through the winter months, and that they may decide to bring back some restrictions if pressures on the health service become too much. Now, restaurants and bars here still can't be full to capacity, Northern Ireland being the last part of the UK to keep restrictions on these, but those are due to be relaxed at the end of this month on October the 31st.
COVID cases have been falling in Scotland, but the government caution they are still higher than we'd like. Infections peaked in early September and there has been a rapid decline since then. That sharp fall took experts by surprise. The difference between Scotland and some other parts of the UK could be because schools here went back about 3 weeks earlier, so there was an earlier surge associated with kids mixing in classrooms. Face masks will continue to be worn in schools and they're mandatory in other indoor settings. You need proof of double vaccination to get into nightclubs or other large events like football matches. And there's controversy here today over a delay to vaccine booster jabs, which won't be available to many until mid-November.
Sarah Smith there. Well, let's go to our political editor, Laura Kuensberg, who's at Westminster. Hospitalisations, deaths are high and moving in the wrong direction, we've been told tonight as winter approaches, but no Plan B at this point in England.
That's right, Sophie. I mean, ministers in Westminster are very reluctant to push the button on bringing back more restrictions on all of our lives. They really don't want to have to go there. I think they fear how much the public would be reluctant to feel like, oh my goodness, we're going through all of this one more time. But I have to say, I think we heard a pretty different tone from Sajid Javid, the Health Secretary, tonight than the kind of language that we've heard from ministers in recent weeks. He was really urging caution. He was really saying to all of us, do your bit. If you haven't had your vaccine, go and get it. If you're waiting for your booster, make sure you're doing what you can. But more than that, he was telling people again, think about meeting people outside if you're doing that. Thinking about wearing masks, even though there's plenty of MPs in the House of Commons who don't wear masks when they're in that sometimes crowded space. space. So I think we shouldn't ignore that the government is trying to strike a much more cautious message to all of us, even though at this stage they do not want to press the button on bringing back that Plan B, which would reintroduce some restrictions. Do remember though, and it is important to remember, the country's in a very different position to where we were last autumn. You know, so many people have had the vaccine. We are not in the same kind of situation. So even though many concerns are there, and there's obvious acute concern about the health service too, the government doesn't want people to fear that we're looking at anything like national lockdown coming back. Even if they push the button on Plan B, that's a very different kind of situation.
Laura Kunsberg in Westminster, thank you. Well, Morocco is halting direct flights to and from the UK from midnight tonight due to the rising coronavirus cases here. Our transport correspondent Caroline Davis joins me now, and this will of course affect people who were planning to go there for half-term.
Yes, of course, just as the travel industry thought it had a clear path ahead for takeoff before half-term, this announcement comes. Now, the Moroccan government hasn't said when this ban on direct flights will end. It's important to say, though, this is not a ban on UK citizens going to Morocco. They can still go, but only via a third country if they're double jabbed or have a negative PCR test. They've also banned direct flights between the Netherlands and Germany too. Now, we know that at least a couple of thousand UK travellers are in Morocco at the moment. It's not clear whether they're going to have to come back early from their trip. In Morocco, it said that they have reduced the daily infection rates. Its weekly infection rate was around 10 in 100,000 last week. In the UK, it was 445. This is a reminder that international travel isn't just about the policy that the UK implements, it's also about how the UK is looked at abroad.
Caroline, thank you. The Home Secretary has asked police to assess urgently the scale of drink spiking at nightclubs and parties amid reports of a rise in the number of cases in recent weeks. There have been claims too that some have even been drugged by injection in cities including Nottingham, Edinburgh and Glasgow. Joe Black reports.
After COVID, it was supposed to be the Freshers' Week they never had. But on this night out at a club in Nottingham, second-year university student Sarah Buckle became so unwell she ended up in hospital.
Out of nowhere, I seemed to just stop communicating. I couldn't talk. It was as if suddenly someone just turned a switch.
The 19-year-old believes she was the victim of an injection spiking.
I was almost screaming out for help and then almost going unconscious and coming back round and choking, and they could just tell immediately, wait, it's not that she's had too much to drink, something's really, really wrong. I have no memory of anything. I think my earliest memory will have been around 9 a.m. My hand was throbbing and a bruise was starting to develop.
Posts on social media talk of similar incidents, and now a petition calling for compulsory searches at nightclubs has been signed by more than 130,000 people. And groups from more than 30 universities around the UK have joined a campaign calling for a boycott of nightclubs at the end of this month. The problem of people having their drink spiked in nighttime venues has been reported for many years. But now there are new fears about the rise of injection spiking. However, only a small number of police forces across the UK say they've had reports of this happening. Despite this, young people we spoke to today in Nottingham said they were worried.
I won't go out. I won't. It's too worrying.
You shouldn't have in the back of your thought, is someone going to stab me with a needle and spike my drink or anything like that. So, yeah, it's really concerning.
It's one thing to worry about your drink being spiked, but having stuff injected into you that you don't know what it is, anything can happen to you. It's terrifying.
The Home Secretary, Priti Patel, has now asked police forces for an urgent update on this issue. And today at the Home Affairs Select Committee, questions about the scale of the problem.
Do you think police forces are taking this seriously enough?
Every Chief Constable takes this as top priority, violence against women in general.
Sarah says it will be a long time before she can enjoy another night out, but she hopes her story will be a warning to others.
If you feel unwell slightly or just think you've had a bit too much to drink, go home. And if you think something more sinister might have happened, do not be afraid to contact the police.
Joe Black, BBC News, Nottingham.
It's been announced that plainclothes officers in London will have to video call a uniformed colleague to confirm their identity when stopping a lone woman. The head of the Metropolitan Police, Dame Cressida Dick, said the new system is being introduced after Sarah Everard was murdered by a serving officer. She said the onus was on the officer to make lone women feel safe. The latest figures show a slight fall in the rate at which prices are rising. The Office for National Statistics says inflation fell to 3.1% in September, still way above the Bank of England's target rate of 2%. And economists expect it to rise again. Here's our economics editor, Faisal Islam.
It was events last year that drove this month's surprise dip in inflation. In September, the slight fall resulted from the comparison with last September's high inflation number, when prices for eating out jumped after taxpayer-funded discounts ended. That flattered this year's figures, all of which shows the numbers during the pandemic are volatile. But from this month, they will inevitably resume their upwards trajectory, which to families up and down the country facing energy price hikes will come as no surprise.
The biggest one for us is energy bill, because we were with People's Energy who went bust. So the energy bill is doubling every month. The prices are higher for the overall shop, but where prices stay the same for things like grapes and strawberries and things that come in a punnet, the punnets have shrunk, so you don't get as much.
Industry, unlike ordinary consumers, has no protection from energy price rises, contributing to a perfect storm alongside shortages of hauliers and warehouse workers. A food industry boss warned MPs yesterday of what was coming.
I really think that the committee needs to think seriously about inflation. In hospitality, which is a precursor of retail, inflation is currently running somewhere between 14 and 18%. That is terrifying.
All of which is starting to get the Bank of England to reassess just how short-lived high inflation could be and how quickly interest rates will go up.
I continue to believe that higher inflation will be temporary, because it's in the nature of the underlying causes. But the energy story particularly means that it will last longer, and that's why we at the Bank of England have signalled, and this is another such signal, that we will have to act.
So a rate rise this year is possible to take the heat out of inflation expected to go up to 5%. What the bank is looking out for in particular is wage rises not just in the sectors affected by shortages, but across the economy. Faisal Islam, BBC News.
The Queen has cancelled a 2-day trip to Northern Ireland today. Buckingham Palace said she had reluctantly accepted medical advice to rest for a few days after what has already been a busy few weeks for the 95-year-old monarch. Our royal correspondent Nicholas Witchell reports.
The Queen at Windsor Castle last night, hosting a reception for global business and other leaders, doing what she's done for nearly 70 years now, representing and gently canvassing support for Britain. She was, by all accounts, in good spirits. It was the latest in a series of engagements over the past 8 days. She was at Westminster Abbey last Tuesday, using a walking stick for the first time at a public engagement. 2 days later, she was in Cardiff for the opening of the Welsh Parliament. At every engagement, there are lines of guests, all of them anxious to meet her and have a few moments of conversation. In addition, there's the daily business of monarchy, audiences, many of them now by video call.
There you are.
This was earlier this week, the Queen in Windsor, speaking via cyberspace to the new Governor-General of New Zealand.
Good morning here. Oh, of course, it's good. It's good morning, isn't it, to you? Yes.
This afternoon, this 95-year-old monarch should have been boarding a flight to Northern Ireland for a series of engagements there tonight and tomorrow. But this morning, Buckingham Palace issued this short statement. The Queen has reluctantly accepted medical advice to rest for the next few days. Her Majesty is in good spirits and is disappointed that she will no longer be able to visit Northern Ireland. The Queen is not unwell, but she is 95, and there's obviously a need for anyone at that age to pace themselves sensibly. And that's all officials insist that's happening here. There are, it's understood, no COVID-related concerns. The Queen has, of course, received her double vaccination. What royal officials and doctors will be focused on is her role at the forthcoming COP26 summit, when the Queen will be hosting all the visiting leaders. They will want to be sure that she is fully rested for that. Nicholas Witchell, BBC News.
The time's almost 6:20, our top story this evening. The Health Secretary warns COVID cases could reach 100,000 a day this winter, but says the government won't be introducing tighter restrictions in England. It's Plan B at this point. And coming up, manager Steve Bruce has left Newcastle United 13 days after the Saudi-backed takeover of the club.
Coming up in Sports Day on the BBC News channel, after Ireland started well in their T20 World Cup qualifier against Sri Lanka, we will bring you the latest on the action from Abu Dhabi as they try to make it 2 wins from 2.
Feeling sick during pregnancy is common, but extreme nausea and sickness that means women can't keep down food and fluid can be debilitating and last the entire pregnancy. Thousands of women in the UK suffer from hyperemesis gravidarum every year, including the Duchess of Cambridge. Now, a study of 5,000 women has found that more than half of them considered having an abortion because their symptoms were so bad. Daniela Relf has been talking to some sufferers.
I vomited anything from 10 to 30 times a day, at least, for 259 days.
I couldn't keep anything down. I used to vomit just from my spit alone.
I lost 3 stone with my first pregnancy and 4 stone with my most recent pregnancy, which was also in lockdown.
Extreme pregnancy sickness can overwhelm you. These women let us listen in to their online support group. For Laura and her unborn baby boy, both their lives were at risk. She terminated her pregnancy.
It was either both of us going or, unfortunately him. And with 2 other kids at home, that the decision was that I couldn't leave them without a mum.
I also considered termination. I had really bad anxiety and depression.
I met with a consultant who told me I needed to eat more. She asked me if I had an eating disorder because I was so tiny, my baby was struggling to grow properly.
The new research, based on testimony the BBC helped to collect, shows the impact of extreme pregnancy sickness. 68% of women said they were bedridden most of the time and needed extra support every day. More than half had considered a termination during their pregnancy. And just over a quarter of women felt so unwell they contemplated suicide.
Devastating for these women who are having to come into hospital so many times.
We showed one of the report's authors what women who'd had HG told us.
I had 60 admissions into hospital over the course of 9 months.
Women are really suffering, and we actually know that there's increasing amounts of evidence now that the medications that we use for hyperemesis are safe. And there's increasing amount of evidence for that. We need to share it with the patients to empower them to look for more help, but we also need to share it with healthcare professionals, both in primary and secondary care, so that they can feel empowered to provide these treatments.
My name's Laura. I am 15 weeks and 5 days pregnant.
2 years ago, Laura was pregnant and suffering from HG. She kept a video diary for the BBC that vividly showed her anguish.
I still can't eat and I can't drink. And I'm hungry and I'm stressed and I can't sleep.
She got through it and now has daughter Ava, but the experience has forever changed her.
Do you think you'll have any more children?
No. If I could be promised that I wouldn't have HG, I would definitely have another baby. That is the only reason we're not having another baby.
It's just too risky for you?
Yeah. I can't be a mum if I've got HG.
That report by Daniela Relf. And for details of organisations which offer advice and support with pregnancy-related issues, go online to bbc.co.uk/actionline. The Financial Services Regulator, the FCA, is to be investigated over its role in the British Steel pensions scandal. Thousands of workers lost money when they were advised to transfer out of the pension in 2017. Some say they have been failed again by the authorities. The National Audit Office will look at the FCA to see if they've given enough support. More now from our Wales correspondent, Hal Griffith.
It's a cloud that hangs over Britain's steel industry. Thousands of its workers who were saving for their future had their pensions preyed upon by a few financial advisors looking for a quick profit.
We all earn the same amount of money, and they all had £85,000 and I had zero. How's that fair?
Richie Pugh from Port Talbot is one of nearly 8,000 workers who followed the advice to cash in his pension and invest, a decision which now means he may have to work longer. He's received no compensation.
It's a long, long battle, and it shouldn't be so difficult to get fairness for all steel workers. It's a lottery, and who gets what. I mean, my pension's dropped £20,000 in the last 2 weeks because of the markets. That's not right. You know, there's no stability for myself, and that's the same for everybody else.
Workers like Richie were told to transfer out of their pension in 2017 after being warned it could fail. Many took bad advice and depended on a regulator being there to protect them. That regulator, the Financial Conduct Authority, is now being investigated to see whether it acted properly and has done enough since to support the workers.
It means that we are no longer banging on the door of the regulator and the compensators. It means that somebody else is of equal standing. For many steelworkers, this will or should mean there's light at the end of the tunnel.
What happened in the steel industry was one of Britain's worst ever mis-selling scandals. But it only really came to light because so many of the workers were all in one place and realised together something had gone wrong. The fear is that other people in other industries may still be vulnerable to a few unscrupulous advisors when it comes to trying to secure their future. The FCA says it's already changed the rules on advice over pension transfers and will work with the National Audit Office's investigation. The findings are due in the spring. Howell Griffith, BBC News, Port Talbot.
Newcastle United have announced that their manager, Steve Bruce, has left his job by mutual consent. His departure comes 2 weeks after a Saudi Arabian-backed consortium took over the club. Katie Gornall is outside St James's Park for us now, and it hasn't come as that much of a surprise.
No, it hasn't, Sophie. I think Steve Bruce himself would have been expecting this. I think the most surprising element of it is that he lasted 13 days under the new owners. He'd been under pressure since before the Saudi-led takeover, with Newcastle second bottom in the Premier League without a win all season. Now, today the club released a statement thanking him for his contribution and saying that a new manager would be announced in due course. Now, Paulo Fonseca, the former Roma manager, has been heavily linked with the club, but then so have so many managers over these past few days. Now, as for what next for Steve Bruce, well, he'll leave here with what's believed to be an £8 million payoff, but also some emotional scars as well. He gave a revealing interview to the Daily Telegraph where he said that the toll it had taken on his family made him contemplate retirement. So there's every chance that Sunday's game here at Spurs, which was also his 1,000th in management, will also be his last.
Katie, thank you. Now, it's been more than a month since the volcano erupted on the Spanish Canary island of La Palma. It has destroyed almost 2,000 buildings on the island, but miraculously, there have been no fatalities. A rescue mission using drones is being planned to save 3 dogs that have been trapped there. Dan Johnson has been following the story.
All life has been caught in this eruption, and these 3 got left behind, trapped by lava. They've been fed by drone, and now they're looking to the sky for rescue. And here it is, the flying retriever, a snare from the air, coming to lure the pups in and lift them up, up and away.
Tests goes very good now. Okay, we are positive, we are motivated, and we go to try, okay?
This sort of rescue mission can only be considered because of the fact human life has been so successfully protected here so far. But that doesn't mean that this eruption is without any risk. So scientific teams are busy monitoring every aspect of the volcano, its lava and its gases, the silent, unseen, airborne threat. Anna is here from Manchester.
I'm starting my second year of PhD, so I never imagined that I was going to be able to come here and see a live volcano. So I mean, it's an incredible experience for me. It's really bad for people, of course. I'm really sad about all the loss, but yeah, for me it's an amazing experience.
Pulling off this daring dog rescue isn't easy, and the canine airlift is currently on pause because they can't actually find them.
I think we can do it. We can do it, okay?
But like so many people here, this team is dedicated and determined. Dan Johnson, BBC News, La Palma.
And finally, the TV chef Mary Berry has been made a Dame Commander for services to culinary arts, charity and broadcasting. Dame Mary, who has had a career spanning the last 5 decades, said she was proud and honoured to have received the award, which was presented to her by the Prince of Wales during an investiture ceremony at Windsor Castle. Time now for a look at the weather with Susan Powell. Hello.
Evening, Sophie. There's plenty to look at as we look at the satellite picture at the moment. This area of cloud to the southwest of the UK is a storm that's going to hit the north of France tonight, but it's also going to push some very wet and windy weather into the south of the UK. That will roll out of the way for Thursday, but then this weather front seeking down from the north will bring the bigger change for the end of the week. Let's just take a look there at what's in store for southern counties in the hours ahead. Some very heavy rain to fall, and there will be some pretty strong winds, gale force along the length of the channel. Here's that weather front coming down from the north by the time we get into the middle of the night. By the end of the night, I think it'll be getting down into southern counties, so only a brief break from the wetter weather here. But the real difference is what's coming into the north of that front, colder air. A frost in some parts of Scotland to start us off on Thursday, and for all of us, a much chillier feel on Thursday with quite a biting wind, and that cold air will stick around for the end of the week as well. It's a nagging northerly through Thursday. We will even see some wintry showers across the higher ground of Scotland. We lose the cloud and the rain from the south quite early on. There'll be some widespread sunshine, beautiful blue skies, but strong gusts of wind and a cold wind at that. We must bear that in mind when we look at the temperatures. That's how you'd see them on the thermometer. Down the North Sea coast, it's going to feel closer to 5 or 6 degrees, a big contrast to what we had earlier in the week. For Friday, things are a little less windy perhaps as this ridge of high pressure tries to move in. I think we'll still get a few showers just squeezing in to the north and west of the UK, but a lot of fine weather on Friday, some patchy cloud around, slightly lighter winds, but we're still in the chillier air. So our temperatures, low end of the teens, I think, big contrast when we were looking at the 20s earlier on in the week. But it does look like something a little milder will return on a southwesterly wind as we look at our forecast for the weekend. Sophie.
Susan, thank you. And that's all from the BBC News at 6. It's goodbye from me on BBC One. We join the BBC's news teams where you are. Goodbye.